Alright, so I needed to get off my butt and film this sections 1 and 2 progress update on my Exploration Station Sticks plus Twine knit-along project, because otherwise I wasn't going to let myself go into section 3, and I really want to get back to knitting with this yarn. So let's take a look at my progress so far. For those of you who have been following along, then you know that I am currently knitting Stephen West's Exploration Station for Eric from Sticks Plus Twine's Exploration Station Knit Along. I will put the hashtag here and a link to his podcast and to the Knit Along discussion on Ravelry will go in the doobly-doo below. In my first update, I talked about spinning and dyeing all of the yarn for this project, so you can click right here. I will link to that video to see a little bit of a discussion and the process on spinning and dyeing to order for a knitting project. So since then, I have knit sections 1 and 2. So the Exploration Station was originally released as a mystery cal knit along, so they would have been like clues 1 and 2. So the project is divided into clear sections, and it's paid for pattern, so I'm not going to give you away any of the secrets, but I do want to discuss the sections to help people who might be considering knitting their own. So section 1 is the short row wedges, and it's straightforward, and don't let the idea that it is short rows be intimidating. If you've never knit short rows before, if you've struggled with short rows in other patterns, it will not be an issue for section 1. Because if you can knit to the end of a row and turn around and go back the other way with no other technique than that, just literally if you can knit and turn your work around and go back the other way, then you can do his short rows, because they're not wrap and turn short rows, they're not German short rows, they're literally just turn the knitting around and go the other way short rows. So don't be intimidated by short rows in section 1 or 2, and in section 1 rather, and you can easily get through the first section of this pattern, and it makes this beautiful increasing sized sort of half moon wedges. They're gorgeous, and you want to make sure that you're picking colors that are going to pop against each other. You wouldn't want to have any colors that are too similar, because it might take away some of the beauty. Although I have seen some exploration stations where they've done like monochromatic ones, or ones where this whole section would be in one color with just the border as a pop-out color, and that would be a beautiful effect too. So section 1, very easy. Knits super fast. Section 2 is Brioche, and I had never done Brioche before tackling this project, and I didn't even do a swatch before tackling this project. So first I want to show you the way that it looks. This is the right side, and I used my blue, and the wrong side is the hot pink color. And Brioche forms essentially a 2-color rib that is really stretchy and squishy. Oops, I just pulled like 5 stitches off the end of this needle. Slide it more onto the cable. So yeah, so Brioche, if you're not familiar with it, if you've never felt it, it forms a fabric that is essentially double thickness and is super stretchy, super squishy, and is completely reversible. So you get a pink stripe down the back and a blue stripe down the front, or whatever your first and second colors are. So it worked up really fast, because you think you're only doing, let me see, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You're only doing like 20 rows for section 2. So it works up really fast. You do, because it's Brioche, knit each row twice, so you know it is more than 20 rows, but works up really fast, makes a really squishy fabric, and is quite lovely. So I did sort of have some revelations about knitting Brioche. I'm not going to do a tutorial right now. I might in the future do one, especially because I'm working on a pattern design using Brioche right now. But I did want to zoom in on a little swatch that I've knit up to show you a way that I found is really helpful to not feel intimidated by knitting brioche. So we're going to go ahead and look at that little swatch and have a bit of a discussion about brioche. So like I said, I've just knit a little swatch here just using worsted weight acrylic yarn of 2-color brioche. So this is the right side here and this is the wrong side here. I hope that you can see enough definition between the blue and the yellow yarns to kind of follow along in what I'm talking about here. But the way that I found it helpful to think about brioche is that it's essentially a 2-color rib, right? So this is the knit stitch and this is the purl stitch. This is the knit stitch and this is the purl stitch. And all of the knit stitches on the right side are blue and all of the purl stitches on the right side are the yellow color. So when you flip it over, naturally the knit stitches on the back side are the yellow color and the purl stitches on the back side are the blue color. So you think of it as just being a 2-color 1x1 knit purl rib. Then, and this is something that Stephen mentioned in his tutorial for the Exploration Station cowl, and he does have, and I will link it, a tutorial for how to do this section in the Exploration Station cowl. So if you're not interested in ever doing any further brioche, you can just follow that tutorial video exactly, and you'll have no problem getting through this section for the shawl. But what he says, and what's important to remember, is that in brioche, if you have a yarn over with a stitch, this is one stitch. So in the previous row, you would have done a yarn over slip 1 together. So this is one stitch here. There's 2 loops, but this is one stitch. And then you have this one, which was a purl, or it would have been a knit, but it's a purl now. So you have one stitch, one stitch. And then these 2 loops are one stitch. And then this one here, the purl. And then you have one stitch. So it's important to, when you're thinking about brioche and when you're reading brioche patterns, to remember that this yarn over belongs to the stitch that it's next to, and together they form one single stitch in the pattern. So you'll see the pattern written as knit 1 brioche, so like brioche knit 1 and then slip 1 yarn over, brioche knit 1, slip 1 yarn over. But a brioche knit 1 is just telling you, remember, these 2 guys are one stitch and you're just going to knit them as if they were one stitch. So I will briefly show a little bit of that. So I'm just doing a garter border on this little swatch. So if the pattern says brioche knit 1, you treat this as one stitch, as if you were knitting a project with 2 yarns held double, and you just knit it. And then it says yarn over and slip 1, so that becomes now one stitch. We turned this yarn over and this knit or slip 1 into one single stitch. And then we're going to brioche knit the next one, which is just knitting but with 2 yarns instead of 1. Slip 1 yarn over and brioche knit the next one. Slip 1 yarn over and brioche knit the next one. And all of the slipping is done purl style, so you're going in as if to purl when you slip in brioche. So the 2 things are, remember that this guy here with its little yarn over is one stitch, and the other thing is treat it like a 1x1 rib. So when you come to anything where you're gonna do decreases or increases, if you were doing decreases in a 1x1 rib, you would want to decrease so that these 2 knits come together into one knit. So you never do really just a 2-stitch decrease. You're always going to decrease, so you would never do like a traditional decrease. You're always going to decrease 3 stitches into 1. So you want these 2 knit ones to come together into one knit one, and we're going to eat that little purl in the middle. So then any 3-stitch to 1-stitch decreases are going to be the ones that you're going to use in brioche knitting. So for instance, you might want to do one where it's slip 1, knit 1, pass slip stitch over, but we don't want to have 2 two knits together, so we need to decrease that guy with this one, which is gonna be moving it and slipping it over the other way. So we just did a centered 3 stitch to 1 stitch decrease, and then we don't lose the brioche ribbing pattern, right? We still have a purl, a knit, a purl. And then any increases that you do in brioche, you're not just gonna go from 1 to 2 stitches, you need to go from 1 to 3 stitches. So you'll usually see knit, yarn over, knit the same stitch again. So that you're ready to have a knit, a purl, a knit on the next pass. So I'll just finish off this row in regular brioche knitting, trying to keep my hands centered in the camera. Not purling, that should be knitting. Yeah, so see, brioche is so easy that it makes me screw up on my garter stitch border. Anyways, so I hope that was a little bit helpful. The two sort of mentalities that make brioche knitting something less scary and something that might be more similar to something that you've done before are that anytime you have a stitch with a yarn over, it's 1 stitch. It's not 2 stitches, it's 1 stitch. And think of it as a 2-color 1x1 rib, and that will dictate how you want to do increases and decreases. I will link in the description below. Like I said, Stephen West did a step-by-step tutorial specific to the brioche stitches needed for section 2 of the exploration station, so that will be linked in the description below. And Mina Phillips recently released a fully brioche cal, Les Moyeux, I believe. I don't speak French, so I could have butchered that. You've heard people call it the squidgy. So Mina Phillips recently released that shawl, and she did a really detailed video with tutorials for brioche as well as some tricks to fix errors that you may have made in your brioche. So I will link both of those in the description below, and hopefully that was helpful. So I hope that was helpful. For me, as soon as I wrap my mind around thinking about brioche that way, it makes everything just very doable. I will say I kind of have it's put a hook in me, brioche knitting, because it's almost like knitting plain rows. Like it's couch potato kind of knitting that you don't need to think too much about, but it's more interesting than just knitting garter stitch or stockinette stitch. So I'm working a big brioche project right now that will be a design that I will hopefully have released in a month. But yeah, love brioche. Once you make that, once you change your opinion on the way that you look at brioche, it becomes, I think, very simple and very exciting and a tool that is awesome to use. So, by all means, you can knit section 2 even if you've never knit brioche before, especially because in this pattern, it's not like you're doing brioche increases or decreases or cables or crossing over. It's just straight up 2-color brioche, so you can do it. Trust me on that. I guess there are increases, but really straightforward. And I will stress it one more time. If you follow word for word, step by step, what Stephen West has written in his pattern, then you will have no problem handling section 2 of the exploration station. So section 3 is, and I'll take you back to the right side, section 3 is a slip stitch pattern that calls for 2 colors, and I'm going to do my section 3 patterning with the light and the dark pink together. So that will be hopefully banged out this weekend because it's the long weekend, and I just really want to get back at knitting on my exploration station. So I hope this video was helpful and interesting. If you are knitting an exploration station either as a part of Eric from Sticks Plus Twine's knit along, let me know about it, and I'd love to see how your project is going. But even if you're watching this video months or years from now and you decide to cast on an exploration station, share it with me. I love seeing the color choices that people are making in as exciting of projects as West knits are, because West knits are the best knits, right? That's all for now. Happy knitting!